So before we begin, graduates, I have a question for you. It's my last chance to have them answer a question. How many feminists does it take to change your life? And you say, I don't know, how many? None! You don't need a light bulb when you're under a glass ceiling. But this is going to be the generation responsible for punching through. Okay, well, welcome graduates, faculty, friends, family, and distinguished guests. Welcome to the Women and Gender Studies graduation. My name is Dipti Misri. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Women and Gender Studies, and today I have the distinct honor of being the Master of Ceremony. And we have what we hope is a warm and memorable ceremony planned for you today. Now, to start our ceremony, we have a poem titled Utopian Futures, appropriately so, to be read by a graduating senior, Joshua Kobe.
So I'm going to read this off my phone, but I felt like this poem would be appropriate, considering like the amount of depressing, stuff that we encountered throughout our education about society and stuff. And I'm nervous. Somewhere the bombing all has stopped, and people begin to sit and talk. And somewhere insomniatic stockbrokers can rest their bloodshot eyes. Because there's nothing left to buy or sell, or kill or die for anymore. We're living inside eternal moments that we've searched for all our lives. There's nobody living by the clock, and every door is left unlocked. Because property died all alone, and capitalism lost its home. There's plenty of fresh air here in town, and plants are all growing on the cars. And now all the streets are used for dancing, and at night you can see all the stars. We're searching for something that was lost, that centuries all have covered up. We're failing to find the smallest fragments of our liberated lives. And every tiny piece we find, we pick up and glue together, collectively working for our utopian futures to collide. In snuggly beds and midnight talks, wandering bike rides and wayward walks, we're making up all of our own music, art, myth, food, and news. It's happening everywhere we go. Collective bookstores and basement shows, sharing songs that we all know, we're making up new ones as we go. And I'm a dream, this is real. I'm a dream, you are here. I'm a dream, you are me. And I'm a dream, we are free. Now can't you feel the ice caps grow? Now can't you hear the forests laugh at piles of nicely packaged toothpicks, all in processed warehouse rows? Because the only processing we do now is with one another in our homes, where people will fight, love, laugh, and cry until the day we die. Here where we share all that we want. Here where we grieve for what is lost. Here where the children grow with names they chose and genders all their own. Here where we celebrate each other. Here where you've never had a boss. Here where we sing like restless kids with half-chewed food inside our mouths. Here in the place outside the box, where there's no more borders left to cross, from each according to ability, and to each based on need. Here in the place where dreams aren't dead, here in the space between our heads.
Thank you, Joshua. That was wonderful. A dream of a utopian future. Now it is my pleasure next to introduce the chair of the Department of Women and Gender Studies, Lorraine Bayer-DeBolo.
Thank you. And as chair, I welcome you to Women and Gender Studies graduation. I didn't know that my colleague Professor Nusri was going to begin with that joke because I have a different version of that joke. So how many feminists does it take to screw in a light bulb? I don't know, but it's not funny. And I like that joke because I don't. It's a toy with, and really deconstruct, perhaps, indirectly, some stereotypes about what it means to be a feminist, and it doesn't really reflect very well the students who are graduating today. But as you're going to hear, CU had one of the very first women's studies programs in the country, and indeed in the world. And given the energy I feel in the room, our majors and minors are justifiably proud to be part of this intellectual tradition. Women and Gender Studies is an academic discipline, but our origins are tied to a social movement. Rooted originally in women's rights and feminism, but now incorporating an even more comprehensive vision that extends to gender identity, sexuality, race, ability, and beyond. We wouldn't be here without social activism. And our 2018 graduates are a wonderful representation of Women and Gender Studies' commitment to social justice and change. And if you'll bear with me for a minute, I'd like to brag a bit more about the degrees that we're conferring today, because these students have so much to be proud of. Women and Gender Studies students are committed to academia and service to the community. Our majors consistently have been recipients of the highest and most selective undergraduate awards given in the College of Arts and Sciences. Last year, as I walked past the graduation ceremonies of a very large major, I overheard the chair proudly announcing that one of their majors had won a Van Eck Award that year. The Van Eck Award is one of the highest honors in the college, recognizing outstanding academic achievement and contributions to the university and Boulder community. Well, this year, in a much smaller major than that other one I was just talking about, I am very, very proud to announce that 3 out of the 18 Van Eck Awards went to Women and Gender Studies. Lorena Aguilera Santana, Nadia Reckel, and Mallory Hale. Katie Wallace, who's graduating today, received that prestigious award last year. The average GPA for Women and Gender Studies majors has consistently and substantially been higher than the average for the college. Women and Gender Studies majors are clearly excelling across their courses at CU, and our Women and Gender Studies minors are equally impressive. Many of our students retain those high GPAs while pursuing additional majors and minors. And over half of the Women and Gender Studies majors have a double major. Not to mention their paid work and their volunteer pursuits as they set their sights on social change, both large and small. Students with a Women and Gender Studies major or minor from CU Boulder graduate with highly desirable skills in critical thinking and creative and complex problem solving, collaboration, and communication. They leave here with a local and global outlook, with plenty to say to a changing world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, for giving us such a wonderful picture of what our department looks like today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of our department. The University of Colorado Boulder became home to one of the country's first women's studies programs, as Lorraine just mentioned, in the early spring of 1974. Amidst the early activism of the second wave, its formation resulted from the tireless commitment and enthusiasm of both students and faculty. In fall 2014, we celebrated the 40th anniversary of this founding. Over the years, it has grown and transformed in small and big ways. In 1989, the program found a permanent home in Cottage 1, an old women's dormitory built in 1884, yes, that's the cottage, where it has remained ever since. Now officially the Hazel Gates Woodruff Cottage, it is still fondly referred to as the cottage. And hopefully some of you were able to visit it earlier today. If you haven't seen it yet, it's very close by. I suggest you wander over after the ceremony. In the 1980s, students could focus on women's studies under the American Studies program. But it wasn't until 1998 that the program was granted its own independent major, in no small part because of the diligent activism of students and faculty. Not long afterwards, we added a graduate certificate program. In 2006, the Women's Studies program became the Women and Gender Studies program, reflecting the evolution of a program and indeed a field that now goes far beyond traditional conceptualizations of women's issues to address broader understandings of gender and the way in which it intersects with race, ethnicity, nationality, sexuality, class, and ability. Finally, in 2015, the program officially became the Department of Women and Gender Studies. This evolving history, we believe, attests to the tenacity of women and gender studies as a field on this and other campuses, nationally and indeed globally. Now, despite the institutional changes in our program, one thing has remained consistent, and that is the passion and enthusiasm of our extraordinarily talented students. Each year, the senior colloquium hopes to invite someone to speak at commencement. It is an invitation of honor, as this person represents someone who has served to inspire them. This year, the seniors have chosen Associate Professor in Women and Gender Studies and the Director of the Miramontes Arts and Sciences program on our campus. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Celeste Montoya.
My soapbox. I'm a little short behind here, but hopefully I can get it to you. Hello, Women and Gender Studies graduates. Thank you so much for the honor of inviting me to speak to you today. Graduation is always my favorite time of year. It's a moment that kind of reminds me a bit of what it felt like to hold my daughter for the first time. The joy and relief of getting to that moment were so great that I almost forgot the pain and struggle it took to get there. Almost. At least enough to have a second child. I'm hoping to get through this speech today without quite the sweaty, bawling mess that I was, but no promises. I've thought a lot about what to say to you today, what final lessons or bits of inspiration to send you on your way. And I struggled, which was odd. I think I've been writing a commencement speech for Women and Gender Studies since my first graduation, which was 10 years ago, in 2008. I was so inspired to be here, and still reeling with how different it was to be a part of a Women and Gender Studies program instead of a political science department. Some of you may know that. It was really, really different. While I may have started writing a speech 10 years ago out of overeager enthusiasm, it would not have been the same speech. So much has happened over the last decade that I've been here. So much has happened in the last 2 years. That what seemed so clear then just didn't apply anymore. The world is not the same. I am not the same. Being in Women and Gender Studies department has fundamentally changed the person that I was and the path that I was on. It has given me so much. I think back to the person that I was when I first started here, what I was reading, thinking, writing, teaching, and I look now. And I almost don't recognize myself. I almost don't recognize the department. 10 years ago, we were in a phase of building or rebuilding. On this stage, we had Professor Allison Jagger and Professor Janet Jacobs, both with joint appointments in other departments. Professor Lorraine Ryder-Davolo was in her second year at CU, having been the only full-time tenure line the previous year. Professor Robert Buffington and I were finishing up our first year here. We had an outside chair, Professor Ann Costain, borrowed from political science. And today, we have a full stage and are almost double that size. Over the years, we've added Professors D.T. Misri, Emmanuel David, Robert Wyrod, Christy Suarez, and next year we'll add Professor Mason Alomar. We have doubled in majors and minors, this year hitting a record of over 80 majors and over 80 minors. 10 years ago, There wasn't a Gender Justice League. There was a Women in Gender Studies Student Advisory Board with the unfortunate acronym of WGST, which evolved to an equally unfortunate and creative acronym WAGON, the Women in Gender Studies Student Organization. And now the much improved Gender Justice League, or the Student Leadership Practicum, is what we have. 10 years ago, Women in Gender Studies, as you heard, wasn't even a department, it was a program. But it isn't the numbers or the status change that has transformed me. Rather, it has been the people within that program now department that have altered my understanding of the world. In thinking back over the last 10 years, what strikes me most is what I've learned from my interactions with colleagues and especially students. When I think back over the past 10 years, I don't think about what I've taught you, but the things that I have learned from you and from teaching you. The things that I've observed from the front of the classroom, in lecture halls or in discussion circles in the cottage library, from reading your papers and exams, from answering questions and facilitating class discussions, from watching you advance from introduction to colloquium, from the first graduate seminar to dissertation or thesis defense, from emails and updates, internships and independent studies, from casual pleasantries to deeper discussions. It is a few of those lessons learned from my vantage or standpoint as your professor that I want to share with you today. They are lessons I hope will carry you forward in the way that they have helped me. They are lessons that have given me hope in even the darkest of times. First, people do change. I say this because I am often asked by my students how I can be so patient in the classroom. Teaching difficult and often controversial material, and then having to respond to an array of questions and comments, not all of which demonstrate concern for critical thinking or sometimes norms of civility. I think the trait of patience is something that I've learned in the classroom. I've learned it by being able to see how students' thinking evolves over the course of a semester, from their freshman to their senior year. That change is not necessarily quick or linear, and you don't always get to witness that change. Occasionally, I'll have a student that didn't seem to particularly appreciate a class, who is now enrolled in a second or even third class with me, sometimes even declaring a major or a minor. Or sometimes I'll meet up with them years later, and they'll talk to me about how something I said or some issue that we talked about in class came back to them years later when they experienced something that was particular to that. It's certainly been the same for me. When something a student has said or a colleague has said that's rubbed me the wrong way, but stuck with me and slowly changed my view on a topic over time. This doesn't mean that everyone will change. And when people do or say things that are harmful, you can't erase the damage that has been done. But as a teacher, I've also learned to give some consideration to intent along with impact, that both are important. A community organizer who came to visit a few years ago talked about a strategy they use to address oppression within their organization, within their community, of calling people into community instead of calling them out. Calling people out is a form of public shaming. It's a powerful strategy in the moment, and it can feel empowering to be the one using it. But it's not always the most effective for achieving the intended change. Calling people into community takes more patience and a belief that people can change. It's a strategy of inviting people to be better and more conscientious members of our community. It's not always the right strategy individually. I know I'm certainly not always up for it. But it is a strategy more conducive to building bridges, coalitions, and social movements. It can become a form of intersectional praxis. Along with this, you can never judge a book by its cover. That everyone you meet has a story or a struggle that you can't even begin to imagine. I used to take so personally everything in the classroom. If a student was sleeping or on their phone or distracted, it was easy to dismiss them as someone who didn't care, or to get obsessed with my own performance. Maybe I wasn't good enough, or heaven forbid, I was boring. But I've since learned that there is often, although not always, a story behind someone's behavior that has nothing to do with me. They're working 2 jobs, or were up last night with a friend in need, that they have a learning disorder or a new medication, that they recently lost someone or experienced a trauma. I've learned not to jump to the worst conclusion and try to give people the benefit of a doubt. From this, I've also learned about human resiliency, about how people can live out struggles you know nothing about unless they choose to share them with you. With this also comes the insight that feminism is a journey that looks different for everyone. If you would have asked me in high school if I was a feminist, I would have said no. I grew up in Colorado Springs, and the characterization of feminism there is what I often start my intro class out with about common and incorrect definitions of feminism. I didn't have the language to talk about my feelings of discontent, and they were not all about gender. Rather, a sense of frustration with a number of things that didn't seem right, fair, or consistent when it came to the issues of race, class, sexuality, as well as gender. Even when I did have the language, my path has changed multiple times. Everyone has a different starting point and a different journey, shaped by personal experiences. It is also something shaped as we are exposed to new ideas, people, theories, standpoints, and experiences. If feminism is the journey, then intersectionality is the destination that we never fully reach. It is the ideal, and it is difficult and messy, and it pushes us in ways that we're not always ready to be pushed. We are never as inclusive as we think we are. Intersectionality requires that we look for power asymmetries, for making visible things that we might take for granted, looking for unearned advantages and exclusions that are intentional but often unintentional. I've learned that self-care, to quote Audre Lorde, is not self-indulgent. It is self-preservation. As much as I love teaching women in gender studies and feel that it is one of my forms of activism, there have been times when I've needed to take a break from teaching the colloquium or Gender Justice League, finally taking my sabbatical. In order to give our best, we need to be at our best. And sometimes taking a step back, even from the work that we are most committed and dedicated to, allows us perspective and rejuvenation, to explore other parts of ourselves that might also be important. During my time off, I was able to rediscover the part of me that loves to write. I was able to spend more time with my children and go for long walks and runs. And I came back ready to engage in some of the fights that still need to be taught on this campus and beyond. I have also learned that leadership manifests itself in many ways. It is not always the person speaking the loudest or telling others what to do. I've learned from watching my students that sometimes it is the person who is listening and watching, the person who can see who is being left out of the discussion and has something to say and invites them to say it. It is the person who sees the talents and abilities of others and finds ways to bring them out and into conversation. It is the person whose enthusiasm and kindness keeps people interested and inspired, who lifts them up when they need it most. There are the usual forms of leadership as well, but sometimes these quieter forms are just as, if not more important. I've also learned that you are never too old to have your mind blown by someone who thinks in a way totally different from you. But also, at the same time, finding yourself in the work of others is also important. The first time I read Gloria Anzaldúa, which was not that long ago, moved me in ways that I cannot even begin to explain. To see in writing some of the same complicated feelings I had with my own identity, and read of a politics that made sense to me in a way that nothing else had. That mattered. Anzaldúa talks a lot about the borderlands, of being at the intersection of multiple marginalities, of the pain and burden that can cause, but also the possibility of simultaneous experiences with displacement and belonging, of being the crossroads and building the bridges. Well, this is not everyone's path. It was one that I can relate and aspire to. Finally, I've learned that critique by itself can be demobilizing, and that thoughtful action can be liberating. But to act, you have to believe that a better world is possible. Some of you may have heard me talking about how social movements are based on critique, are also inherently optimistic. They're rarely characterized this way. You all know the trope of the feminist killjoy by now. But why would you risk the danger of a fight if you did not believe that an alternate future was possible? In spite of the horrific and heartbreaking things that I have studied over the years, my focus on social movements keeps me from despair. I am inspired by the creative and resourceful ways that people resist and the radical imaginaries that build coalitions and collectives. I find similar motivation from my students. Arundhati Roy writes, "Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. It is not necessarily on those quiet days that I can hear an alternative future, but on days like today, and in the everyday passion, compassion, and commitment I see in my students. So continue your critiques. They are important. But don't forget to hope, to look for and believe in other people, to reach out and build bridges where they are possible, to continue your journey, letting it be shaped by those that inspire you, while you shape those of others by inspiring them. Work on being the best version of yourself and encouraging others to be the best version of themselves. Take care of yourselves. And remember that other world and keep fighting for it."
Thank you so much, Professor Montoya. I feel like I was as inspired by your words and learned as much as I think our students will have. So today we have 4 student speakers who I think exemplify the unique voice and perspectives of our students and what they bring to the program, to the campus, and now to the world. Please get ready to be moved by these forces of nature. First up is Zoe Nafuz.
Passionately hated, but had like a huge crush on. You can say that with this major, my feelings about men haven't changed that much. But I'm actually not up here to talk about masculinity, even though I and everyone graduating would love to unpack that for you. Instead, I'd like to talk about my feelings. So I have to be super real with you all right now. I don't always love CU. I don't love some of the speakers CU allows on campus, Milo Yiannopoulos, Charles Murray, Ann Coulter, to name a few. I don't love frat boys who yell racial slurs from their houses, and I don't like the discrimination that a lot of marginalized students face on this campus. What I do love, however, with all of my heart, is the commitment to social justice fostered within this specific community. Because of this major, I knew that if I was feeling unsafe or disrespected or just plain angry, I was never alone. And I could walk up the stairs of that beautiful, quaint cottage, knowing there was someone in there that felt the same way. Before I got to college, a lot of people told me, don't let your anger get the best of you. Well, if I've learned anything over the past 4 years, it's that I'm actually my best when I'm angry. I know I'm not the only one who's poured my energy into Facebook arguments, called out my own professors for closed-mindedness, and been called a bitch by someone tabling for TPUSA. Well, to quote Tina Fey, bitches get stuff done. I will happily take on that name to see change in my community. On that note, there's a lot of pressure in feminist circles to be perfect, to be exceptionally unproblematic and informed to the highest degree. I would truly love to be all of those things, but of course I'm not. My education has made me a much kinder person, more understanding, more willing to be made uncomfortable on behalf of others. But I make mistakes, and you make mistakes, and we're all gonna make a ton of mistakes in the future. So I can't force you to make any promises to me, but I'll make some promises to you before I go. I promise to be patient, not only with the people that I'm trying to educate, but also with myself. There are a lot of difficult jobs out there, and I'm not going to rank them or anything, but changing people's minds has got to be in the top 5, at least, I think. Definitely top 5. So yes, we will all leave CU and probably be emotionally exhausted forever. But let's all make sure to be kind to ourselves in the process. I'm always telling people, let me live, but well, let's let ourselves live, just for a little bit. I think that we deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Our next speaker is Adriana Portillo.
Hi everybody, my name is Adriana Portillo, and first and foremost I would like to thank my fellow graduates for nominating to speak today. I would like to begin by sharing a little bit about my journey to make it to this day. I am a first-generation college student, born and raised in northeastern Colorado. My parents arrived in Colorado over 25 years ago from Mexico, and it is thanks to them for their unconditional support I am able to graduate. Gracias a mis padres por el apoyo y la ayuda que me han brindado detrás de los 4 años. I knew I always wanted to come to college because time after time, I would hear my parents tell me, you have to get an education so you can make a better life for yourself. And I think about that today, and I know I have done just that, and I hope to help others do the same. I went to a predominantly white high school where I was a minority as a Mexicana, same as here in Boulder. And although there were limited resources for me, I made it and I am now graduating college. I came into CU as a psychology major, and after taking Intro to Feminist Studies at my first semester, I was hooked. I knew this was a career path I felt passionate about, and that is what Women and Gender Studies gave me during my career here at CU. Lecture after lecture, I found myself getting more and more invested into social justice, and more specifically, social justice revolving around women's rights and women empowerment. There were classes that challenged me, that had me scratching my head, questioning every single aspect of society and our laws. And yet, I knew I had to keep learning, and I would do the same the following semester. However, this semester, I was sadly disappointed when I couldn't sign up for the new courses being offered next semester. As registration passed, and I heard students signing up for Women and Gender Studies courses, I hoped that they would find the same passion I did back my freshman year. My Women and Gender Studies classes have given me the tools I needed to make a better life for myself and others to follow, by making even a small change. Because a small change today can make a large impact down the road. So thank you to all the Women and Gender faculty and staff for your guidance and help and support. It's crazy to think 4 years have passed by. 4 years of stress, homework, exams, sleepless nights, and days I would never forget to eat. But those are all over, and on to the next chapters of our lives we go. For some, more school, and for others, adulting. But either way, we can all know we made an impact at CU with our involvement on and off campus, involving ourselves where we see injustices, and getting involved to make a change in our own way. To make a change in our lives, in our families, and hopefully our community. So my fellow graduates, congratulations to us. We made it, we survived. We may be a little traumatized and wake up thinking we forgot to submit an assignment. We are done.
Next is Jack Tillman.
Thank you, Professor. Can everyone hear me? So I have to thank you all selected me today because I am such a killjoy. Just before I got to Celeste's speech, I really don't want to disappoint you. But genuinely, thank you to my peers for thinking of me today. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are on, and CU is on, the traditional territories of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations, which makes us guests on this land. unless we have Indigenous ancestry. In fact, the cornerstone of this very building was laid in 1875, 2 years before CU opened its educational gates, and 10 years after the massacre at Sand Creek. This massacre, led by volunteer settlers, many of whom were Civil War veterans, slaughtered hundreds of Arapaho and Cheyenne citizens. While the Arapaho and Cheyenne nations were unarmed, the settlers proceeded onto the reservation land the nations had already been forcibly relocated to. And that's why we have Old Main. I share this history not to dismiss the multiplicity of conditions or traumatic experiences each of us bring into this room today, whether on account of one's ancestral, generational, or personal struggles. Some of the ancestors of those in this room were forcibly captured and enslaved. Some witnessed the border crossing them. Some migrated here to escape genocide. And some were fleeing imperialist conditions the US imposed and may continue to. Let's not forget Puerto Rico. While we have all arrived here for a variety of reasons, we are also all here in this very spot as a result of the Sand Creek massacre. It does not matter that we were not the individuals who actively broke treaties, forcibly removed or displaced over 500 sovereign nations through systemic rape and genocide. We know better from the intersectional feminist analysis we've been equipped with that settler colonialism is not an event, but a structure that is ongoing, which means it continues today, not just in the occupied territories of the United States, but transnationally, in Palestine, Kashmir, First Nations of Canada, all over. Therefore, rather than unconsciously reinforcing settler colonial futures, I want to challenge my brilliant cohort here to think critically about how we can actively support Indigenous futurities. Because Indigenous survivance reinforces Black, brown, queer, diasporic, women's, trans, and Crip lives. Let's ask ourselves how our bodies may be differently and complicatedly used to uphold settler colonial logics. How are we distinctly complicit? What are we actively doing to interrogate such complicities? And what are we going to do differently? To close on an unusually encouraging note, I wanted to discuss the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. For those who are hearing of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy for the first time, you're probably more familiar with it than you think. It is the Mohawk, Seneca, Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, and Tuscarora governing structure that the United States used as a model for today's Constitution. Under the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, 2 councils ensure separation of powers. One functions as a separate governing entity, and the other is comprised of the larger Confederacy, united by a common goal of living in harmony. One of these councils was even composed entirely of women. We can't receive justice on stolen land. However, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy predates colonization. It continues to exist, despite generations of attempted forced assimilation. I am hopeful that what was once and continues to be an Indigenous governmental structure will resurge. To quote Turtle Mountain Chippewa scholar and one of my very favorite professors here at CU, Dr. Danica Medek-Saltzman, we need to ask ourselves what kind of world we are making, singing, dancing, and calling into being. This is what Indigenous futurisms are all about: imagining, dreaming, insisting, building, and demanding that we move together toward the best future yet. Thank you.
for that profound and sobering, and yes, very killjoy, rightly so. Our final speaker is Katie Wallace.
Hello everyone, my name is Katie Wallace, and I feel it important to begin today by acknowledging that I am the proud product of a community college, as are two of the other folks also speaking today, and countless others sitting amongst you. Many of us have taken a non-traditional path to get here today. We are mothers, nurses, and lifelong learners. We are artists, witness bearers, and survivors. We are community organizers and defenders of democracy. We are what equity in education looks like. So when the President of the United States says that he, quote, does not know what a community college means, unquote, I want to point to the graduates here today and say, this right here is what it means. And Mr. President, it doesn't matter that you don't see us, because we see you, and we see our place in the future of this country. To my fellow community college students, and to the many of you graduating from a non-traditional path today, you are seen. Your lived experiences are valid, and what you do in the world will matter greatly in the grand scheme of all of us. Thank you for persevering forward despite everything. When I first began writing this speech, I spoke with my women's studies and, let's be real, lifelong mentor and hero, Dr. Celeste Montoya, who quipped, "The thing about you is agency." So I aim to share with you all a bit about my agency. For me, it comes from a great well of others who inspire, support, and sustain me each and every day. In life, in school, in work, my greatest strengths have always been bolstered and demonstrated by those around me. I have been a community organizer and a campaigner since working to re-elect President Obama in 2012. And one lesson I learned on my very first day of that work struck me as meaningful so far beyond the campaign trail. If you feel alone, you are doing your job wrong. So the best thing I have to say as we embark toward the future together is to create teams around you that inspire you, challenge you, light fires of hope inside of you, that ensure you never feel alone. While examining futurities and the state of hope in our world, Jose Esteban Munoz noted that, quote, "The anticipatory illumination of certain objects is a kind of potentiality that is open, indeterminate, like the effective contours of hope itself." I step in beside Munoz to insert that it is not just an illumination of certain objects, but also people that connote potentiality and hope. Gather those around you who inspire this potentiality in you. Find those who create a future imaginary in their lives every day, just as the professors in our department have demonstrated throughout our education. Form connections, support others, and give rise to movements that center your own agency and that of everyone around you. And from there, find ways to ceaselessly expand that agency. Lend voice to the voiceless by yielding the room you are given so that others may speak their own truths. Struggle always for others to attain the equity and power agency provides. Beyond that, learned family, I can leave you only with the wise words of Gloria Anzaldúa. Quote, "May we do the work that matters. Vale la pena, it's worth the pain. Always remember that people are worth it." Thank you.
Zoe, Adriana, Jack, and Katie for these wonderful speeches. And one of the things that I've loved about hearing all of these speeches, one after the other, is the affective diversity that our students embody and bring to the stage. I think that is so important. So I really appreciate the range of affects and that you activate with your inspiring speeches. Okay, so we move on to awards. The Department of Women and Gender Studies has several scholarships and awards, and we're thrilled now to announce the recipients who were selected from a pool of, I'm not saying this lightly, exceptional candidates, exceptional applicants. Full descriptions of each award are found in your program, so please take a look at those. Handing out the awards are Professors Emmanuel David and our newest faculty member, Professor Christy Suarez. I will now remind everybody that as you come up on the stage to receive your awards or degrees, please do, as students have been doing so far, come up on this side of the stage when we announce your award or degree and exit on that side of the stage. You can see students do this, so just follow that convention. So the first award is the Lucille Berkeley Buchanan Scholarship. And we've been giving out this award for several years. This is a scholarship that honors Lucille Berkeley Buchanan, the first Black woman graduate of the University of Colorado. She graduated in 1918 with a degree in German. And this year is a very, very special year for this award for two reasons. The first is, of course, that 2018 marks the 100th anniversary of Lucille Berkeley Buchanan's graduation. And we've had some commemoration of that fact on our campus this year. The second is a reminder of a shameful history at CU. Although the Departments of German and the Department of Women and Gender Studies have been awarding a scholarship in Buchanan's name for a number of years, this year is the first time the University of Colorado itself has publicly acknowledged that this extraordinary woman graduated here at all. Because when Buchanan graduated with honors in 1918, she was not allowed to accept her diploma on the Mackey Auditorium stage alongside white graduates of her cohort, nor was she included in the yearbook. From accounts I have read, she sat in the auditorium waiting for her name to be called, and her name was never called. She lived to be 105, and yet her remarkable presence, her place in CU's history, was never acknowledged until this year. Thanks to the efforts of media studies professor Polly McLean, who was also the first Black woman to receive tenure at CU. A few days ago when I read about the Mohawk students, brothers, at Colorado State University, who had campus police called on them because they joined a tour, a campus tour a few minutes late, and as a white woman who called campus police said, they seemed too quiet and they looked kind of Mexican. I was reminded of this history. When I read about the Black woman student at Yale a couple of days ago, who had campus police called on her by another student for taking a nap in the common area of her own dorm, I was reminded of this history. When I read yesterday about Black students at the University of Florida being violently rushed off stage by a white faculty usher simply for dancing their joy while they walked on the graduation stage, I was reminded of this history. We remember Buchanan's story and history of exclusion as a way of calling attention to the continuing exclusions of the present in the field of education, but also as a way to strengthen our resolve to change this order of things. The Lucille Berkeley Buchanan Scholarship is awarded to a student who demonstrates a commitment towards social justice and who may be the first generation in their family to attend college. This year's recipient is Rick Knuckles. Journey to college with a clear intersectional framework. To quote from Rick's moving statement, as someone who is bisexual and genderqueer, I feel the injustices faced by the LGBTQ+ community the most personally. While academia and social activists often codify the injustices faced by those not in power, law is how a society puts these understandings into practice. That means that one of the best ways to help many of those who face injustice is the practice of law. After my studies, I want to use my academic knowledge of oppression to navigate and change the law in ways to promote justice and for those who face injustice. Thank you, Britt, for these inspiring. We have the Jean Dubovsky Scholarship, given in honor of the first woman justice of the Colorado Supreme Court. Jean was unable to join us today, unfortunately, but we appreciate her long-standing support of our department. This award is given to a Women in Gender Studies major and is based on academic record, education and career goals, community and campus-wide service, as well as a demonstrated commitment to raising awareness and combating oppression in all its forms. This year, the award goes to Jackson Eagle. Jackson has nevertheless made the time to pursue a range of activities at CU. This year, for example, he led a workshop at the Transforming Gender Conference called Navigating Intersection and Transfeminism. In his application, Jackson wrote, and I quote, "I'm particularly committed to anti-racism and bringing together students from across campus to be part of something radically inclusive," end quote. To that end, Jackson was recently active in strategizing with faculty, staff, and other students to plan an inclusive celebration of community at a time when, as one of our graduation speakers mentioned, at a time when our campus has seen a series of visitors who espouse openly hateful ideologies in the name of free speech. The committee could think of no better candidate for the Dubovsky Scholarship. Congratulations. About the achievements of these scholarship recipients as they complete their studies at CU. Next up is the Women in Gender Studies Excellence and Inclusion Award. The award recognizes outstanding student projects that explore issues pertaining to diversity and inclusion at CU Boulder or in the US more generally. It is designed to help foster an inclusive and welcoming campus climate for historically underrepresented groups in the field of education. Students from across campus are invited to submit research or creative works for consideration by a committee made up of faculty, staff, and students from our department. Once again, the applications for this year were stunning, phenomenal, and we have learned so much from reviewing these submissions. This year's recipients are Lauren Arnold and Selena Wellington. Submission. Lauren could not be with us here. I'll do Lauren's later because Lauren is not here. Selena, thank you for coming up to the stage. We recognize Selena for their performative piece, When My Body Becomes the Art, a moving and poetic reflection on the artist's decision to go on testosterone. In the artist's words, the incorporation of my physical body in the piece demonstrates how the ritual of gender is enacted on my physicality. The body cannot be separated from the art. Thank you, Selena, for this inspiring work. We will be sharing these projects online and in our next newsletter as we continue to engage in discussions and learn from our students. Thank you so much. Lauren Arnold's submission, although Lauren was not able to join us today, but we're grateful for the submission. And that submission was titled What It's Actually Like to Be Black at CU. It was first published in the CU Independent a few months ago, and it was read at the time with great admiration by many of us. So we were pleased, at least I was, to see this appear as a submission for the Women in Gender Studies Excellence and Inclusion Award. This article offered a critical and personal look at the experiences of Black students, particularly Black women on our campus, from the classroom and the dining hall to student parties. For example, Lauren writes, and I quote, "In class, race is brought up more often than I expected. Part of me is overjoyed that these important topics are discussed, but another part leaves class disgusted at the conversations that we've had." End quote. And that is, I think, a sobering thing to share. But the conversations about race that are so important for the education of our overall student body are also very, very simultaneously exciting and discomforting for students of color and Black students on our campus. The article concludes with a call for diversity in both the student population and faculty. We're very, very grateful once again for this submission, even though Lauren cannot be here. So, a round of applause. Now, every year the Faculty of Women and Gender Studies has a challenge of determining which student we should honor with the Joanne Easley Arnold Outstanding Senior Award, an award named in honor of Professor Emerita of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at CU, for her long-term commitment of women and gender studies. Joanne passed away a few years ago. This award is indeed a very special one. It is given to a graduating women and gender studies student to recognize them for outstanding leadership and service to women and gender studies. It is to be awarded to someone that the faculty and staff have admired for their commitment to the program, and for whom there may not yet have been any formal recognition through one of our other scholarships or award nominations. This year's awardee is a non-traditional student, a mother who has worked as a nurse and then owned and sold a small business. These were career choices she made with finances in mind. But she's committed to social justice and describes her life as a struggle to get to a place where she could choose. And when she returned to college, she chose to major in women and gender studies. In all her roles in life, she believes in not just showing up, but really being present. Although we cannot always prevent human suffering, she never wants to see anyone feel like there is no way out of that space. As a means to further her social justice work, she has chosen to study law in the field of ethics and compliance. She has been accepted to the master's program at CU Law School and will return. Our outstanding senior award goes to Marion Rosenbach. Congratulations, Marion. Well, the moment that many of you have been patiently, perhaps not so patiently, been waiting for the presentation of our graduates. If you're following along in your program, you'll notice there are some names that we will not read off because some of our graduates are participating in other graduations with conflicting times or were unable to attend for other reasons. So we'll start with our graduate certificates. The graduate certificate in Women and Gender Studies is designed as a complement to a graduate disciplinary program. It provides graduate students with the opportunity to think in an interdisciplinary fashion about women and gender studies and to learn from a variety of scholarly and methodological approaches. Students in this program come from a wide array of disciplines, including but not limited to dance, theater, sociology, political science, communication, media studies, environmental studies, philosophy, religious studies. It goes on. Please come to the stage, once again on this slide as I read your name. Presenting the students with their graduate certificates is Professor of Distinction, Alison Jagger. In English literature as well as a graduate certificate in women and gender studies. He notes that the certificate has allowed him to effectively question the methodologies and theories practiced in English literature research, focusing not only on how feminist readings shape our relationships with texts, but how we can impact communities outside of academia as well. Congratulations. Jimena Kio Serrano. The graduate certificate in women and gender studies. Back to form. Jimena has completed the graduate certificate in women and gender studies while earning a PhD PhD in Spanish and Latin American literature, with her dissertation Embodying the In-Between, Queer Subjecthoods and Imagined Becomings in Trans-American Narrative and Film. Jimena notes that the WGST graduate certificate has deepened her knowledge of critical theories and feminist practices, invigorating continuous transdisciplinary movement and reflection in her work. The dedicated mentorship and intellectual rigor of the Women and Gender Studies faculty have facilitated ever-dynamic modes of reading, teaching, and being in the world, elements which spill into her current writings and visions of future scholarship. Congratulations. Hillary Steinberg. Is Hillary here? I'm uncertain whether she will be able to be here. She is on the PhD track in sociology and has completed her master's thesis this year titled Taking Risks and Taking Care, Identity Formation in Young Adults with Chronic Conditions. Now we will move on to our undergraduates. Please stand up if you're able and line up at this side. As I read each of your names, please come up these stairs to receive your certificates. For each student, I will be reading a brief statement. Presenting the minor certificates is Professor Robert Weirod. And Professor Emmanuel David. Okay. Professor Robert Weirod. Did I not get that name? Okay. So to earn a Women and Gender Studies minor, you must take a minimum of 21 hours of WGST classes. As our students will attest, these are not easy classes. They challenge students to think critically, locally as well as globally, and across intersections of race, ethnicity, class, and sexuality. Faye Green. Come up, please. A bachelor's degree in economics, as well as a minor in women and gender studies. She's a member of the Triota Honor Society, a Mesa hotline volunteer, and has been on the Dean's List and is a Colorado native. We do too! Tyler is earning a bachelor's degree in environmental studies as well as a minor in women and gender studies. She plans to pursue a master's in public policy focused on gender violence. Tyler would like to thank everyone in the Women and Gender Studies department as well as her friends, family, and partners. Shoshana is graduating with a degree in sociology, a minor in women and gender studies, and the certificate in LGBTQ studies. She has been awarded both the Jim Downton Award and the Lasting Legacy Award. After graduation, she plans to spend some quality time with her cat. Bex Schmelzel. Bachelor's degree in sociology, a minor in women and gender studies, the certificate in LGBTQ studies, and they made the Dean's List multiple semesters. Right after graduation, they're starting a job as a tour actor-director with Missoula Children's Theater, where they will be traveling to a different U.S. city every week to teach children the art of theater and how to continue to find their voice beyond the stage. Bex would like to thank their family for constantly supporting them in their identity and their passions. They would also like to thank Shoshana Pollock and Sam Bullington for radicalizing them and activating their hunger for social change. Graduated with a degree in international affairs and minors in business and women and gender studies. She's a member of the Delta Gamma fraternity and studied abroad in Buenos Aires, Argentina. After graduation, she plans to soak up some sun in San Francisco and enjoy freedom from homework, but eventually continue her education. She's interested in inclusive immigration law reform and the study of gender, conflict, and peace. She would like to thank her family for encouraging and supporting her education, and the faculty that inspired her to become a more intersectional and thoughtful feminist. Danny Sussman. Is Danny here? Danny wasn't able to make it. All right, so we will move on now to our majors. For Women and Gender Studies, students must complete a minimum of 36 credit hours. Our majors take several required classes, including feminist theories and senior colloquium, both challenging classes, although in very different ways. The colloquium in particular is a rite of passage. I'm going to have to ask you about that doctor later on. In class. The colloquium in particular is a rite of passage. It affords students an opportunity to put what they have learned into practice into a common class project. I'm told it's also a litmus test for survival in feminist community. If 15 or more headstrong students can come to agreement on a common class project, then really anything may be possible. Even a feminist world. So this year's senior colloquium chose to work on issues of policing, detention, and incarceration in the United States. One group organized a discussion on queer prison experiences with E.B. Litwak, a formerly incarcerated Jewish lesbian who currently directs the non-profit Witness to Mass Incarceration. Another group produced a website that compiled and curated information and resource links for Colorado sex workers. And a third group organized a public screening and discussion of a film by Boulder's Modus Theater, wherein Boulder law enforcement leaders read the stories of Colorado dreamers. These are amazing projects, and seniors, we are so proud of the work you have done. We're so proud that you could come together on a common theme for the film. I know how hard that was. And Rob, that was a good workaround, a 3 projects thing rather than 1 project. Wow. Yeah, that was good. A good way of like consensus, but also breaking the task up into different components. So it is an honor as well as a great privilege to introduce our graduating seniors, earning a major in Women and Gender Studies. Presenting the undergraduate major degrees in Women and Gender Studies is Professor Robert Buffington. Okay, Lorena Aguilera Santana. International student from Mexico. She's graduating with a double major in Women and Gender Studies and Sociology and a certificate in Leadership Studies. Lorena received the Van Eyck Award and Magna Cum Laude Latin Honors in Sociology. She would like to thank her family, partner, and friends for all their support and encouragement. Congratulations. Nadia Brego. And Women and Gender Studies, a minor in Ethnic Studies, and certificates in Public Health and LGBTQ Studies. They have been active in Gender Justice League, Phi Iota Honor Society, and worked as a program coordinator at the CU Women's Resource Center. Nadia is also a 2018 Jacob Van Eyck Award winner. After graduation, she will be pursuing a master's in English literature at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. She plans to write a master's thesis that includes a feminist and queer examination into British romantic female novelists. Congratulations. Minor in Sociology, and an elementary education certificate. After graduation, she plans to teach elementary school and advocate for social justice in her classroom and beyond. in both Sociology and Women and Gender Studies, as well as the LGBTQ certificate. They are a member of the Phi Iota Honor Society, and also clearly a very gifted poet. Abigail Madeline Levitz. Abigail is graduating with degrees in both Women and Gender Studies and Psychology with a certificate in LGBTQ Studies. She was a learning assistant for 2 semesters in the class Women's and Mental Health. She would like to thank her mom for keeping her together, her grandpa for being an encouraging force in her life, Dr. Tina Pittman-Wagers, and Dr. Emmanuel David for fostering a love for queer studies. She's planning on attending graduate school in the fall of 2019. Wayne Matson. In Women and Gender Studies and a minor in Sociology and an emphasis in creative writing. Stuart has also earned a certificate in Global Gender and Sexuality Studies. She enjoyed the opportunities to dive into and strengthen her writing at CU with various topics from researching sexual assault on CU's campus to continuing her work on her rock opera. After graduation, she plans to travel the world. Stuart would especially like to thank Sarah Massey Warren, Robert Buffington, and Glenda Walden. Glenda Cruz. Glenda has a major in Women and Gender Studies and a minor in creative writing. She's a member of Toyota Honor Society, Shabbat student board member, and a staff member at the Gender and Sexuality Center. After graduation, she plans to move back to California, moisturize her skin, and continue to educate herself and others on how to make this world a more compassionate place. She would like to thank her mother and father for giving her unwavering love, support, and trust, as well as every friend, family member, and stranger who has willingly sat through probably unprompted yet painfully in-depth analysis of the discourse. And maybe even change their perspective on issues because of it. It's been a real pain at family dinners. Emma Presley. A major in Women and Gender Studies, a minor in Political Science, and certificates in LGBT Studies and Applied Business. She served as the president of the Toyota Honor Society, president and event coordinator of the Gay Straight Alliance, was an active member of the Gender Justice League, and worked with Boulder's Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence as both a children's advocate and domestic abuse response team member. Emma would like to express her immense gratitude for her family, both given and chosen, for their unconditional love and support. She would like to thank also the entire Women and Gender Studies department, especially Professor Montoya and Joanne Belknap for their mentorship over the past 4 years. Adriana Portillo. Adriana is graduating with both double majors in Women and Gender Studies and Psychology, as well as double minors in Sociology and Ethnic Studies. She's a member of Pi Lambda Chi Latina Sorority Incorporated, and studied abroad in Alicante, Spain in the fall 2017 semester when she completed an internship at the local Red Cross, helping women who have experienced domestic violence. She would like to thank her family and friends for the unconditional support, and would also like to thank the Women and Gender Studies Department for helping her find her voice on such a large campus. Oriana Marie Richmond. Oriana is graduating with a degree in Women and Gender Studies and minors in Spanish and Political Science. She was the 2017 recipient of the WGST Jean Dubovsky Scholarship and is the president and founder of Bucks for Reproductive Rights, a Planned Parenthood Generation Action student group that works to make sure all students at CU Boulder have the access to exercise their reproductive rights to a comprehensive, safe, and affordable health care. After graduation, she will be working as a community organizer with Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains. She would like to thank her parents, Angel and Dan Richmond, for always supporting her goals and giving her the toolbox she needed to achieve them. She truly appreciates the sacrifices you have made for her so she was able to go to college and graduate today. She would also like to thank her friends and her girlfriend for giving her so much love every day and making her college experience worth much more than everything. And Women and Gender Studies, along with a minor in leadership. Trio was recognized with the Outstanding Senior Award from Pan-Hellenic Council. She would especially like to give thanks to her parents. Nicole Marie Rosado. Nicole is graduating with a degree in Women and Gender Studies, a minor in sociology, and has also earned a certificate in global gender and sexuality studies. After graduation, she plans to spend some time recuperating in Indonesia before attending law school in California, hopefully Pepperdine, and to continue her volunteer and advocacy work with victims of intimate partner violence. That you know already. Graduating with a degree in Women and Gender Studies and is also a member of the Toyota Honor Society. Marion says it has taken her 22 years to reach this moment, and she could not having the courage to be in spaces that went against normative timelines. She would like to thank Professor Bayer DeBolo for her guidance and kindness, never letting her feel like she did not belong. She's grateful to all the WGST staff, faculty, and peers for giving her language to express her internal feminist trait that needed releasing. To her community college educators, particularly Marianne Grimm and Kathleen Heffley, her rock star friends and family for their constant encouragement and love, to Gianna and Sydney, who inspire her to walk through this world with fierceness and brilliance by example. And lastly, she would like to thank Fletcher for teaching her that she is worthy and for showing her unconditional love. Shannon Gisela Small. Women and Gender Studies and Humanities with English. They're the co-president of CU Humanities Club and the Aero and ACE student group. After graduation, Shannon plans to take a year off before going to graduate school. She would like to thank her father as well as her friends for giving her the support and environment she needed to succeed in university over the last 4 years. Graduating with a major in Women and Gender Studies, a minor in Ethnic Studies, and a certificate in LGBTQ Studies. Jack transferred to CU from Front Range Community College, is a member of Toyota Honor Society, and received the Lucille Berkeley Buchanan Scholarship in 2017. They also worked as a rape crisis advocate at Moving to End Sexual Assault and the Colorado Organization for Victims Assistance. Jack would like to thank Dr. for finding them where they were, as you found me. Like Sarah Ahmed writes of her first reading of Audre Lorde, Dr. Mystery's classes, this is slightly weird, but I think, no, weird in a good way, in the lifeline, to quote, just enough to bear my weight, pull me out, and help me survive. They would like to thank Dr. David for venturing into and dwelling with their amorphous archival project. Their support has challenged them in the Monosian sense to feel hope, glimpse utopia, and conjure possible futurities. They would also like to thank Alicia Turchett and Valerie Butt for their laughter and care across semesters. Amy for their life world of queer love, their parents for their unfathomable support, and their sister Gab. I too overflow. in both women and gender studies and ethnic studies, and certificates in global gender and sexuality and LGBTQ studies. She would like to thank her mom for being a feminist inspiration in her life, and her dad for always being accepting and incredibly supportive. She would also like to thank her best friends for their friendship and the amazing faculty in the department for guiding her through her journey at CU. Her degree in Women and Gender Studies. After graduation, she plans to help elect millennials to Congress because she's tired of watching old white men ruling this country. The Women and Gender Studies Department, and specifically Dr. Celeste Montoya, for their time, dedication, and patience, and for demonstrating to her just how personal the political treaty is. She would also like to thank her family, born with and chosen, for guiding her with love, strength, and compassion. She writes, "Every ounce of me that is good is because of you." Graduates, one and all, we are so proud of who you are and everything you have accomplished. And we look forward to hearing back from you about your new adventures as you embark on them in the world. We have come at last to the end of our ceremony. But first, I would like to give a special thank you to our student employees and volunteers and our spectacular administrative staff, Valerie Butt and Alicia Kirchhoff. Today's festivities, we would just collapse without them. There's just no doubt about that. So please make sure to thank them in person at our reception upstairs in the Heritage Center after the ceremony. Thanks again to you both. Now, for the moving of the tassels, I'd like to invite all the graduates to please stand if you're able. Now, loosen those limbs, get ready for it. Now, together as a class, as those who have, okay, I have to do this again. Now, together as a class, as those who have come before you, and hopefully the many who will follow you, you become graduates of the Department of Women and Gender Studies. You may now move your rainbow tassels from right to left. Congratulations once again to our graduates and our award recipients, as well as their friends and family present today. Okay, graduates, one more time. How many feminists does it take to change the world? Hi. None. Feminists are too busy changing the world to bottle with light bulbs. Watching some laughs in this part, we laugh. I appreciate the laughs. So, go forth and change the world, graduates. We expect nothing less from you. Please join us, everyone, for a catered reception upstairs at the Heritage Center, which can be reached by stairs or by an elevator right outside. Graduates, please leave the reception as a class up to the 3rd floor, where we can all celebrate your accomplishments.